Hello everyone, I am going to talk about mercantilism, which is one of the IPE's theory. Mercantilism is the main economic system that was practiced in the 16th to 18th century. The central idea of mercantilism is that the nations with the most gold is the richest. How is it possible to gain the most gold? Well, they will increase their exports than imports, meaning that the nations will sell goods to other nations instead of buying goods. So in return, they will be able to collect precious metals such as gold and silver. So the main question is, how is it possible to gain wealth like what mercantilist believes? Mercantilism depended upon colonialism. During the period of 16th to 18th century, mother countries such as England, Holland, France, and Spain compete against each other. These nations established colonies outside Europe to provide raw materials. As you can see from the diagram here, which shows the cycle of mercantilism, the colonies will provide raw materials such as gold, silver, fur, lumber, foodstuffs to the mother country. Therefore, mother country will not have to import from other nations. The mother country will also use the raw materials and manufacture them into goods. To better illustrate this, let us watch a clip to explain about the relationship between mother countries and their colonies in this era.
Harvesting sugar. Colonies in the mercantilist era were seen as a way of enriching the home country, and their trade was regulated accordingly. The mercantilist system functioned as follows. Colonies would sell raw materials to the home country, where they would be manufactured and then sold back to the colonies as finished goods. Colonists were banned for competing with manufacturers in the home country. The British colonists in what is now the United States exported a variety of raw materials, such as tobacco, rice, and codfish to Great Britain, in exchange for luxury items imported from London, such as services for tea, finer clothing, eyeglasses, and much else.
So, the mercantile classes induced governments to enact policies that would protect their business interests from foreign competition. So, in order to understand this, let us take examples done by the British Empire. The 1651 Navigation Act was introduced to impose restrictions on colonial trade and prevent the colonies to trade with other European countries. So in the act, only English ships would be allowed to bring goods into England. And then the North American colonies could only export its tobaccos and sugar to England. Another government policy is the 1764 Sugar Act. So this act was also implemented to introduce high customs for sugar and molasses imported from outside of England and the British colonies. Now, let us see some of the impacts of mercantilism. One of the impacts of mercantilism is it reduces the choices available to the consumers in the marketplace. Why did I say this? Because mercantilists wanted to restrict imports. With fewer imports, it will cause less competition and eventually high prices for the products. The second one is mercantilism encouraged nations to fight over scarce resources, rather than find ways to engage in trade which will be mutually benefit.
We move on to another concept in international political economy, which is globalization. Let me introduce to you about the general idea of globalization. It is the process of interaction and integration between people, companies, and governments worldwide. It is the free movement of goods, services, and people across the world in a seamless and integrated manner. It is the word used to describe the growing interdependence of the world's economies, culture, and populations. This is the history of the globalization. Basically, globalization is not new for us. It has started on 17th century prior to the Industrial Revolution. It was a great deal of economic output was rather restricted to a few countries. For example, in 1750, more than 50% of the world's industrial output was produced in China and India, compared to some 80% in Western Europe. On 18th century, we can see the United States as the major supplier of wheat in the 1816 and 1870s. While on 19th century, there are establishment of the Bretton Woods system and also transnational corporations. We can also see there are computers, Microsoft Windows, mobile phones, and intervention of World Wide Web. On 20th century, China has joined the World Trade Organization, and also the number of internet users has increased to 800 million in 2005. There are basically three aspects of globalization in the context of international political economy. The first one is trade liberalization, followed by internet and technological advancement, and lastly, internationalization. The first one is trade liberalization, which is supported by the establishment of GATT and WTO. These institutions supported the trade liberalization with the removal of trade barriers and encouraging more export and import to be happen. As a result, countries are becoming more and more reliant upon each other for their export earnings, income, and employment. The second one is the advancement of technology and internet, which encourage new tools in doing business such as e-commerce. This enables all firms, including domestic and multinational corporations, will have easier access to foreign market, consequently enabling firms of all sizes to compete more easily in global markets. The third one is internationalization, where it brings together nation-states to interact with other countries by expressing or exchanging their opinions. This will potentially result in an economic agreement, treaty, or business deal with other countries. There are many benefits of globalization, and states can gain the benefits, especially in trade. Let's take a look at one example from the country of Vietnam. This picture I show you is the rice terrace in Vietnam. For your information, rice is really important for the Vietnam's economy. Previously, Vietnam had limited the amount of rice to export abroad. With the forces of globalization in the mid-1990s, Vietnam had liberalized its trade. Therefore, with quota elimination, the demand for Vietnamese rice increased, and price of rice has increased. Consequently, this led to higher standards of living for Vietnamese rice farmers. Thus, globalization has helped lift many of them out of poverty. In order to gain advantage of the globalization, countries need to position themselves properly through right policies. Those economies that open themselves on free trade usually will benefit the most in globalization. Having political stability and good economic environment are also crucial in order to attract foreign markets and encourage trade. Let's take a look at a video. What are the opinions of Gemma about globalization?
I think globalization cannot be stopped. Nobody can stop globalization. Nobody can stop trade. And I believe if trade stops, war starts. Trade is the way to solve to dissolve the war, not to cause the wars. I think globalization did a fantastic job in the past 30 years. Enriched a lot of countries, but of course, caused a lot of problems, right? Young people did not have opportunities. Small business have not opportunities. Developing countries were neglected. But it's only 30 years. It's a baby. It's a growth. You have to improve it. If you do not improve it, then you kill it. It's easy. Most of the time, to kill something is much easy. So my beliefs, it's our generation's job. Today, we have a better technology. We have a better knowledge about globalization. And it's our generation's responsibility or opportunity to improve it. Tell me, how can you stop globalization?
Now we move on to our last concept, which is the hegemonic stability theory. The first thing that we have to understand is the central idea of the hegemonic stability theory. So, hegemonic stability theory believes that the international economic system is stable when there is a single and powerful state to maintain, shoulder the cost, articulate and enforce rules of the economic system. So, the big question is, what are the three key attributes of a powerful state's hegemon to govern the economic infrastructure? The three key attributes are: the state need to be dominant politically and economically, as this is important to influence other regimes to follow the rules in the economic system. The second is, the powerful state or hegemon must have the will to shoulder the cost, especially during the financial crisis. And finally, able to articulate and enforce rules in the economic system. Now, I'm going to share with you the three key dimensions of the operations of liberal international economy, which needed to be shouldered by the hegemon or powerful state. The first one is to promote open markets. Open market is an economic system with no barriers to market activity. The hegemon needed to put pressure on states to open up their markets and reduce their trade barriers. This will help to induce weaker states to join cooperative regime, which decrease their transaction costs, reduce uncertainty, and build consistent expectation for economic interaction. So the hegemon need to be dominant in the international economic system in order to influence the other regimes to cooperate in the open trade. One of the mechanisms to promote open market is with the establishment of World Trade Organization. The second dimension is the hegemon needs to provide liquidity through lending, especially during the financial crisis. Liquidity here means money moving through the system easily. For example, during the 2007-2008 financial crisis, the international economic system badly affected due to the subprime mortgage crisis. At that particular time, people need money in order to pay debt and loans. However, banks which provide loans are reluctant to lend the money during the financial crisis. Therefore, the hegemon needs to restore the bank's confidence to provide money and revive the international economy back to normal. The final dimension is the enforcement of stable exchange rates. Exchange rates is the value of one's country currency to the value of another's country currency. It is important as it will affect the balance of trade between nations and influencing investment strategies. For example, it is quite risky to invest into a foreign country which fluctuated more often. For example, most of the countries, especially the developing ones, peg their currencies to US dollar in order to attract the foreign capital. Now, we have to understand that each state is concerned with four basic interests which is impacted by the international trade. The basic interests are political power, aggregate national income, economic growth, and social stability. So, when there is a single hegemonic state, small states will have access to a large export market and thus high potential for increase in aggregate national income and economic growth. The hegemon likewise will have considerable export opportunities. In other words, this will help hegemon prosper and potentially securing the hegemon's dominant position.
That's all from us. Thank you for watching this video.